Welcome to PURR, Paul's Utilities for Rapid Response, and in particular a brief description of how to use the search replace of expressions. You can find the documentation on Confluence under the space strategy office. I keep all of my notes there, and Paul's Utilities for Rapid Response has its space, and all of the main operations are described with some notes. This one is about search and replace. It has more detailed notes and screenshots and everything else, but I thought a video would help you understand how to use this. And it's not easy to do this correctly, but it's possible. We've had an example where for Moog we've done almost 70,000 replacements, and for Ford recently we've done 30,000 replacements without breaking any worksheets. So let me show you, walk you through the use case for Ford. The idea is that calendars need to have quotes added around them because in one of the service updates the expressions can become ambiguous and workbooks can fail unexpectedly. How would you do this? Well, the utility which you can download, the download link is on this page. When you launch it, you can store configurations, and in my case, just to save myself typing, I called it quote calendar on the local host server, and the purpose of this is a demo. First thing, there's a readme here which has a summary. It's got the link to this page with Confluence, and more importantly, it's got all these links here to online resources about regular expressions that I found to be good references. Regular expressions have a very weird syntax, but they're very powerful, and unfortunately there is no other way to perform replacements safely, in that we could specify search that is very specific, and we'll walk through how to do this. So first thing you need to do is you need to configure a server. This one is connecting to my local host, and you don't have to save a password, but I did for my test purposes. And this is where it's going to read the workbooks from. I can optionally apply a filter, so I could say I want all the workbooks, but in this case I want to pick just a simple workbook which I defined with some sample expressions, and I'll use that for testing. You can specify the owner of the resources. Again, you could say everyone or just mine, or spell out which one you want to do, and you can say whether you want to do public, private, or private, all the workbooks including private workbooks of somebody else's users. For that you do need a password for the master admin account, and the utility does basically the same thing as the upgrade does, which it impersonates every user so it could process their private resources as well. You can also specify date range and filter only resources that are modified recently. In this case, if I check this, it would only look at resources modified after, for example, April 1st. That's useful when you do a bulk resource backup. I'm not going to use this here. Resource tag is another way to select resources, as it says here. I haven't finished writing that piece of code. So now that I specify where to get the resources and I specify how to select them, again, this is going to do just this one workbook for testing. Each of the remaining tabs on this utility is dedicated to a function, and this one is the search replace for resources. At this point it only does workbooks, but at some point we'll expand it to do filters, hierarchies, and everything else that can contain an expression. You would start with searching the resources. Eventually you will switch to modify, and then typically I would suggest you do a trial run. When the utility does a trial run, it will write workbooks to a folder, but it will not modify them on this server here. You can also check this checkbox to create a backup. It'll create another folder before changes are made, and so you have copies of workbooks handy. It's useful for testing, but it's also useful just in case something goes wrong. This is a useful option where you can check every worksheet query gets parsed before and after. and to see if this utility has broken any of the worksheets. If the log has different message, if the worksheet was already broken and is still broken, obviously, then versus if the worksheet was okay, but after doing the replacement, the expression returns a parser. It's easy to find these. I would start with just a simple search, and you can have just a single expression. It actually is made up of 4 places, or you could have an Excel file. Typically you're going to need an Excel file. In case of calendars, there is a file that looks more or less like this, and again we'll try and demystify this. I dumped a list of all the calendars that are unique in this and have no spaces, and there's 150 of them, and this search expression is just glued together from the calendar name and to create this pattern, and we'll go through what this weird set of characters means. And the replacement expression is the same for all of them. It's basically if you look at it, it just inserts quotation marks, in these 2 locations, this one here and this one here, but it basically pieces together an expression from part 1 calendar name and part 2 just adds quotes. So how do you come up with an expression like this? Well, you have to start somewhere, and the best thing to do is to go to one of those resources which I recommended, which is the regular expression tester and debugger. Let's start with a simple expression, and all of the expressions I'll show you come from the 4th dataset. This one uses month in date arithmetic to offset MRP date, but it also uses the name of the calendar month. So imagine if you search for month, and I am using the regular expression tester that I recommend. As you type the expression, it has a description of what it does here to make it easier for you to understand. Also, at the bottom of this, it has assistance and basically built-in help that helps to guide you through this complex language. Microsoft has a very good reference online, and there's many others. You can just pick your favorite, but the links that I provided, the 3 links, worked for me. So anyways, back to this example, I searched for month. There is no need for wildcards in regular expressions. It works a little differently. A star basically corresponds with dot star, but just read up on the language, you'll see why most of the time wildcards are not necessary. So this will match anytime month, and this note here says that it's case insensitive, so whether it's upper or lower case, it'll still match, and you can see that here on the right hand side. It'll match month. Well, it matches both of them, but I really don't want to match both of them. I want to match just one that is used in an expression, and the expression really is either a plus or a minus sign followed by 0 or more spaces. You don't really have to have this space, followed by a digit, followed by at least 1 space. You do have to have the space here, followed by the calendar name. So we'll still work with the month calendar. The way you would do this is you would put in 2 parentheses, square brackets. You would say I want either a plus sign or a minus sign, but it's still not matching because I didn't say anything about the space. So to do space, and you can find it, it's basically there's the backslash small s means it's a space character, and the asterisk means I need 0 or 1 of those. So now I've covered the plus or minus and this, but I still have to put something about a digit. Well, there's a shorthand for digit, so now I cover a digit. Well, it could be more than 1 digit, so I can put a multiplier that basically says, I need 1 or more. Plus means 1 or more. So I need 1 or more digits, and then I really want the space, and I want at least 1 space. So I want plus, not 0, at least 1. And as you can see, as I typed it, now it matched this expression. So we're off to the races. We're beginning to see something sensible. Well, but for example, if I what if I don't have +0 month? What if there's a field called offset? Well, as you can see now, it didn't match the offset. So that means that my rule can't just put a digit. I would have to put alphanumeric character, and for those there's an abbreviation lowercase w. So now you can see that the expression becomes more sophisticated in that it matches a digit, but it also would match alphanumeric variable name or field name or column name. So so that's good, but there's how do you create the replacement? So here you can have this panel for substitution. Well, it's really, if I basically wanted to put quote month quote, well, it's doing something other than I thought, because it's eating up these these extra prefixes and suffixes. So this is where we have to give a little more meaning to this. So in this query, in regular expression, you can give a name to a section of a pattern, and you do this by opening a parenthesis and putting a question mark, and then you have to this is what it looks like. You put in the name of this expression in parentheses, and then until the closing parentheses here is the expression itself. So we'll do that on the simpler expression, and here we give it the name month. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll say the first section will be called part 1, and it will extend all the way to here. And now you can see that this was matched in green. This is the prefix. Well, I want to know, to also label the calendar. So I'm going to say that calendar is the second section, and this follows up to here. But it's not enough, because, for example, what if I have an expression that's called month, for example? Well, that's where you have to get a little more sophisticated. If we're looking for an expression, then you can have an expression like in this case. It ends with a parentheses, but it could also end with a space. So let's do that. Let's say that in order for me to match, I'm going to add a part 2, and that part 2 must be either at least one space character, or I should really put them in square brackets, or it could be a parenthesis, and there must be at least one. So now you could see that the expression will match this parentheses. And if I had another line, like for example, if this one had, for example, some sort of a comment, it would also match that, because there's just a space in here. So now you could see that the Persian green, which is the beginning, matches the prefix, the calendar matches the one in the middle, and part 2 matches the trailing piece. So now I could piece together the expression by saying that I want, the syntax for this is even more weird, that I want part 1, and I want to add this quotation mark, and I want calendar, and I want to add the second quotation mark, and I want to add part 2. And I guess I actually did make a mistake. Just a second. Oh yes, I'm missing. The syntax is even more interesting. I need this $sign. So this allows me to reference these 3 pieces. And now, as you can see, you have quotation marks added every time there is a positive match. So if I had, go back to this example, if I had a variable called month, well, that one doesn't match my criteria, so it will not get replaced. This one here doesn't match the pattern for date arithmetic and already has quotes, so it won't get replaced. And if I had an expression here that, for example, referenced a column ID called month, well, this one wouldn't get replaced either, because it doesn't follow the pattern of plus minus plus, an offset plus everything else. So this is kind of how building up this expression works, but it's actually gets a little more complex. So I'm actually going to take a copy of the real expression for the month, the final one I ended up coming up with, and I will copy it here, and second we'll copy this one first. And you will see that it is actually a bit more complex. So again, going back, it still has the same. First part is the prefix before the calendar name, then there's the calendar name, and then there's the suffix, some stuff that has to be after the calendar name for us to be sure that it is actually part of the expression. And as you can see, by the time I was done testing this expression, it became a little more complex. So this is still minus or plus, followed by 0 or more spaces, because if you have this, that is still valid, rapid response expression. There does not have to be space. That's why it says asterisk. If I put a plus, it wouldn't match it, because it means I must have at least 1 space. So it gives you an idea about just how specific you can be. Again, the /w means any word character, and you can see here the tester explains all these things that I'm saying, right? So W plus matches any word character, meaning lowercase or uppercase alphabetical, followed or a digit between 0 and 9, or an underscore. So it basically is an identifier. And plus means at least 1, right? At least 1 digit, or the field name has to be at least 1 character long. Then followed by space, and in this case I do have to have a space. In other words, that is not legal in rapid response. There must be a space, so that's why it says a plus. And then there's a possibility in that I also, rather than having this, I also could have a closing parentheses, right? This means that it could be an expression. So in other words, I could have an expression that looks like this, plus 0, plus 9, and parentheses, and I would still want to match this, because I could have an arithmetic, or I could basically have a field offset, something like this. So really you need to cover all the cases. In this case, the pipe means or, so it's either one of those simple math, digit, plus, minus, sum, digit, all that, or it could be just a parentheses to denote the end of expression, and it has to have at least 1 space afterwards. So that's what this prefix means. The calendar name is explanatory, it's just a calendar name, and the suffix again serves to make sure that it's part of an expression. And in this particular case, if you look at the description here, it says the part 2 must be either equal sign, greater than, less than, minus, plus, multiply, divided, comma, new line, space, curly brace, and square brace. Essentially, I'm looking for something that could be any of the typical expressions that you could see. It could be either a filter or anything else. So this actually is the final expression that has passed all the testing against the Ford's dataset. And you know, how do you arrive with at this? Well, you start with this utility, and the output is color coded. And this is an example of the output where and this is a good segue to explain what the preliminary search is for. So if I match everything on a simple search for month, it means that I will know how many instances there are of the word month within the expression. That doesn't mean that they're all valid for replacement. This is where the actual real expression will go in, and this is where the replacement expression will go in. So I'll go to the online tester, and I'll take that expression, and this is where it will go in. The worksheet table is necessary when you're looking, for example, for references to a total demand field on a part table. Well, total demand is not a unique name, so I need to know what table I'm on in order to find the path that would help me identify that I am actually on a part table. There's 150 paths to the part table. Optionally, you can specify a configuration file, and I showed you an example before. Typically, you test with the one calendar, and then eventually, when you're done, you would create a file that has all calendars. In our case, this is the Excel file that I showed you before. It has 150 calendars. That I only took calendars that have no spaces. And again, once you know what the expression is, you simply concatenate the prefix, which by now should look somewhat familiar, with the suffix and the calendar name in the middle, and this actual file is the one you send to the utility. The replacement expression is always the same. So this is how you would go and test it, and eventually you would run a utility and you get Excel output, and the Excel output is color coded. It looks like this. It will have a log, just listing any errors or anything like this, and it would have the name of the workbook, worksheet, and it would tell you whether it's matched on a month or another date, another calendar name, and it'll color code all of the instances that were replaced in blue and all the ones that weren't in red. So it makes it easy to scan, because I could scroll through this output until I see something in red, and then you will see that, oh, this one is in red. It's not replaced a week because it already has quotes around it, and it's actually not a date arithmetic anyways. You can continue and you say, oh, here a year is part of the name of a profile variable, so that doesn't need to be replaced either. So it makes it easy to scan. It's just as simple as scrolling quickly and spot checking. And in order to make it easier, I've added two columns at the end of this, and says, well, how many preliminary batches do you have? So this is how many total instances you have of week or month, and the second one is how many of them were actually replaced. So you simply need to find those where this number is greater than this number, and then you need to spot check or just review all of them. I mean, even reviewing several hundred workbooks does not take that long with the color coding. So to summarize the behavior of how to put it all together, we went through building this expression and explain how the replacement works and how the preliminary search helps you in testing. Well, now to run it, you would really use the configuration file, and in my case I will use the same as I use for Ford. And I will choose to modify workbooks. At first I'll do trial run, and I can choose to back up the workbook before replacement, and I can choose to parse the worksheets before and after for errors. That would give you a full report. And again, we're connecting to my local server. We're processing this time all the resources, and I will still leave them as private. And I chose this to be my output, and then I can save my changes and run the replacement, and it'll process all of the workbooks. There's 64 private workbooks, so it's giving you this now in keeping with the PURR motif. It gives you the little cat logo progress, and we're in a moment we'll have the report ready. It's on workbook 40. So it is doing 150 rules for every expression. So it's actually doing quite a bit of work. On Ford's case, it took a bit over an hour. So we're up to 200 replacements. And it'll open the report momentarily. So the first one, it lists a summary, processed 64 workbooks, 8,800 worksheets, 130,000 expressions, and it ended up with a total of 216 matches. It replaced all of them. There were 77 worksheets with parse errors, but we didn't break any new worksheets. And then you get the log, which I've showed you the log before. It looks somewhat similar, and you're simply scrolling to look for red. The first section is the filter expression, so you scroll a bit further and you see column expressions, and so you need to sort of scan both. And as you can see, it is in some cases that certain expressions were not replaced. You just need to make sure to validate that that's correct. And again, a reminder that these two columns help you find them. You can just filter it down on those that not all of them were replaced. And the workbook, the output includes a folder for every time this utility runs. It includes a folder which has a copy of all the workbooks that were replaced, that ended up with replacements, and it has a copy of the log, which is timestamp. That's the one that we're looking at right now. Lastly, once you uncheck the perform trial run, the utility will actually go and update the workbooks in the server. When it does this, it does several things. One of them is if the user is locked out, it'll unlock the user. If the user is set to single sign-on only, it'll change temporarily to normal login. If a workbook is already checked out and private copy exists, it'll rename that private copy, update the one that's checked out, and then check it back in, and then rename the private copy back so you don't lose your work. And while it's doing all of this, it will also apply a comment. And in my UI, I don't currently have a text box for this. There will be one when you see the utility. You'll probably have one. It is a string that you can apply to both check-ins and to author notes that will be added just to denote, tag every worksheet that was changed and every workbook that was changed, and put in a check-in comment that will indicate that this was done by the program. In this case, the utility, it just refers to a support case that required us to change the expressions. And that is completes the overview of the workbook expression search replace. Soon we'll be extending this utility to also cover other expressions in filters and hierarchies and elsewhere. Or, if you notice something not working correctly, please do send feedback on the page. There's a suggestion box, or you can just email me, and we'll do our best to make the changes that are needed to make sure that this is indeed a useful utility. Hope you enjoy it. Give it a go. Download this from the main page. At the top there's a zip file which I keep current, and keep the feedback coming. Thank you.